Okay, so in this video, we will be looking at creating the student record. So whenever we click on the Add Student button, then what we want to do is we want to open up a new page, and in that page, we want to display a form, and then we will be handling that form, sending the data to the controller, saving the data to the database, and then reloading back to the student's index page. So first, what we want to do here is we want to create a new page. So I'm going to name it create.svelte, and I already have created a sample markup for this. So I'll just paste that in here before I lose it. And we'll look into this in a while. Let me just save that. And the next thing that we want to do here is we want to display this page. So for that, we have already implemented the route, I guess, because we defined a resourceful route. So the students.create and store are already defined. So to display that, let's go to the controller. So in the student controller, let's create a new method called create, which is going to display the view. So here we want to return inertia render, and what do you want to render? We want to render the create page inside the students folder. So this should display the students create page. And what else do we want to do? We want to add the route in here. So inside add a student, in the add a student button, so that's inside index.svelte, and here we have the link. Okay, so what I want to do here is, instead of using the native a tag, I'm going to use the Inertia's link tag. So using this, what's going to happen is it's going to create an SPL-like experience. So without reloading the browser. So this is going to enable the SPL-like experience. So first, let's import that link in here. And we don't need this inertia. We only need the link. And I'm going to replace the a tag with the link. And the href is gonna be, so I'm gonna use Ziggy. And if you're not sure about Ziggy, then Ziggy can be is a package that enables us to use the route helper functions in the JavaScript stack as well. So as you can see, we have the students.create route called in here, and this is going to resolve automatically just like Laravel does. So now this should redirect us to the students.create page. If we go ahead and check out, then okay, let's click on it, and now as you can see, we are redirected to the create page. And one more thing that we need to do here is we need to implement the layout. So I'm gonna implement the authenticated layout for the create page as well, and I'm gonna wrap that authenticated layout for the page content. And let's also import this. Okay, I think we need to copy the import statement as well. So define the script tag and import it. Now this should look good. Okay, this looks good. And one of the features that we need to implement here is the dependent dropdown feature. So whenever we click on class 1, then I want to display the students belonging to this class. So for that, let's first display the class data that we have in our database. So that should be simple. In the student controller, what we want to do here is we want to grab all of the classes, classroom, okay, not classroom, but classes. And we also have the class resource. So what I want to do is I want to pass that to the class resource so that it would format the data properly, and then pass that in. And now we can pass this data to the front end. Okay, so this data will be passed as a prop. So the way we receive that in this Svelte is by receiving that as a prop. So to receive that, what we can do is we can define the export let classes. So this is saying to Svelte that this is going to be received as a prop, and if we go ahead and log that in, we should see all of the classes data. Let's save it and let's go ahead and reload. And I need to open up the DevTools and okay, we have it undefined. Okay, so as you can see, we have the data with an array of 10. So we can now loop through each of the data and display that in our select component. So here, okay, I think what I'm gonna do is I'll just first implement the form related data in this, and in the next video I'm gonna implement the dependent dropdown because I think that will take some time. So yeah, first let's implement the form related stuff, and in the next part we'll be implementing the dependent dropdown. So this is done for now. And okay, before looking into the form, let's look at the documentation for the form. And Inertia comes with a form helper, and we can use this to simplify our form handling. So what we can do is, okay, we have the store server-side validations. We already have that. Okay, we don't have that, but yeah, we can implement that. So okay, let's define the form. Router let value function handle submit. Okay, we have the form helper, so we are going to use that. So let's go ahead and define that form, and we also need to import this, so we can copy this code, import that here. And by the way I would like to organize the files, so import files is the library related imports. I try to keep them at the top, and the local imports I try to keep them somewhere in middle. So this way we can actually get an idea of what are the imports for this file. So here we need to check what are the data that we need to handle. So we have name, email address, phone number, class, and section. So I'm going to define these. Name is also going to be null. Email, we don't need the password, we actually need the phone number. And class ID is gonna be null, and section ID is also gonna be null. And we don't need the remember me because we are not implementing login or registration for now. So yeah, this should be enough. And by the way, what I'm also doing here is I am keeping the names, the keys for these similar to our database attributes. So this is gonna make it even more easy to handle our forms. So what else do we have? Okay, we need to bind these with our form inputs. So the way we do that is by calling in bind value. So in this case it's form.name. And by the way, one more thing to note here is that I'm using $sign to access the form, because this form under the hood is actually a Svelte store. So to access the Svelte store we use $sign. And okay, we are binding the value with form.name, and we also have an error comment in here, so we'll be implementing this error later. Okay, for the email as well we can do the same. I think we can use GitHub Copilot for this, but it didn't work out, so I'm gonna type it. So bind value is gonna be form.email. Same for phone number, and make sure you bind it in the input, not in the label. Form.phone number. Okay, we also have class. Okay, not in the label, actually inside this select. So bind value form.class ID and form.section ID. Okay, let's see this thing in action. To see that this in action, what we need to do is we need to open up Svelte DevTools, and in this Svelte section we can, okay, let's reload it once because it's not loading the files in here. Okay, now as you can see we have the app, and we can actually select an element in here. Okay, let's select all of it. Okay, this is not the actual behavior. Okay, I think this one. Okay, we have the name, we have the authenticator layout. Okay, I think inside form. Okay, not in the form but main. Okay, so inside this create, I think we should see that. So we have the form use form, we have the form object, and we have the name, email, and all the other stuff. So I think we can zoom that, okay, so that you can see it properly. And now if I type something in here, then as you can see this data gets reflected in here. So now these two are properly binded. And the next step that we want to do here is, okay, let's work on, okay, submit. So whenever we submit the form, what we want to do is we want to make a post request to our route, the desired route. So I'll define a function called submit. Okay, let's define that in here, function submit, and we want to post it to, where do we want to post? So here as well we can use the route helper. So I want to post it to students.store, and we don't have to pass any data to this because this form already does that under the hood. So that's really simple to deal with. And how do we call this? So whenever we submit the form, and then only then we want to call this function. So we can do that by calling on submit on the form, and we can also pass in the event modifier. So I want to prevent the default behavior, and I want to call the submit function. Okay, this looks good. And what else do we have in here? Okay, we haven't implemented the validation, so I think we should implement that, and in the next part we'll be looking at implementing the dependent dropdown. Okay, so let's do that. So inside student controller, let's create the store method, and let's also create a new request. So that's gonna be store student request. Let's create that request. Artisan make request store student request. Let's import this, and let's also go ahead and define the validation. So on auth, for authenticated users, we can allow the student data creation, and here let's write some validations, and I'm going to use Copilot for this. So name is required, class ID is required and should exist in the classes table. Section ID is also required and should exist in the sections table. And okay, we don't have phone number or roll number. We do have phone number required and string. And what else do we have? Name. Okay, we have email, and this should be required email, and let's add in the unique. So inside students table, the email column. Okay, these should do. So let's go ahead and implement a simple validations. I'll just use the documentation. So if form.errors.email, then we are going to display that error inside the create. So let's go ahead and do that for, okay, email. I guess we can do that. So if form.errors.email, then we want to display that, and maybe we can do text red 500, and we are going to display that error. So form.errors.email. Okay, let's try it out. Let's also save the controller. We'll just dd the request all, so that we'll know that we have all the validations passed. Okay, let's go ahead and test it out. We already have an email for admin@admin.com, and what is this thing displaying here? Okay, let's try to invalidate our data. Click on save, and okay, this didn't submit, I guess, because I didn't click this thing. Or what's the issue? I'm not really sure. Let's check it out. Okay, let's try to debug this thing. I'm not really sure what's happening. So form action method is going to be post on submit, and we also have the button. So maybe I haven't included the button type of submit. Okay, we do have that. So why is it not working? Okay, let's try to log this thing to see whether we are calling this function or not. Let's click on save, and okay, we are making that request, but I'm not really sure what's happening. So maybe this is throwing a validation error, but we are not displaying that properly. So email address, let's try to look into the network tab, and I'll just save it once again. Okay, we are getting a 302 and 200. Okay, we are getting a 302 redirected error. So okay, let's try to remove the request class once and then see what's going on. Okay, we do get this. Okay, my guess is that there's probably some issues with the validation, because I tried excluding the validation, and it did work. So we can do some workarounds to this. Okay, let's keep a value of class ID 1 and section ID 2 for these. And okay, let's try it once again, and I'll try to pass in an ID email address that already exists and click on save, and nothing's happening in here. Okay, so the issue was with the form filler. So I filled the form and this passed in some non-numeric data, and then it created some issues because I couldn't see any errors or anything. So now if I pass in a valid phone number and we don't pass in any classes, then I passed in an email address that was already used, and in that case, as you can see, we have an error where the class ID field is required, the section ID field is required. So we can fix that. Okay, we already have the class ID and section ID, but since we are binding that to our form, so for that reason this thing is not working. So we can do, okay, I think I'll just copy these and paste that for the phone number, and let's do the same for the class, and we can do that, and let's also do the same for the section. Okay, that's done. And now if you go reload, and I'll try to add an email address that already exists so that I'll get an error for the email and for the class and section. Okay, we only get an error for the section ID. Okay, I made a mistake in here, so that's the reason. And yeah, this thing reloads whenever you save the changes, so that's one of the annoying things. But yeah, once you get it properly, then you won't have so much of issues. Okay, now as you can see, we have the class ID and section ID field is required validation working. And okay, that's it for this part, and in the next part we'll be looking at fetching the class data, displaying them in here, and then we'll also work on implementing the dependent dropdown. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one.